Namaste, everyone. A very warm welcome to you all. I'm really happy to see you here today because this is a very big day for me. This is the very first webinar that I'm hosting under the banner of my own school, the Śraddhā School of Yoga. I am Chitra Ganesh. I've been a yoga teacher and practitioner for over 2 decades now. I belong to the Viniyoga tradition of Acharya T. Krishnamacharya. This tradition is firmly rooted in mantra chanting and scriptural study and is committed to spreading yoga as a holistic practice. I am also a Vedic chanting teacher and a teacher trainer in this tradition. I'd like to begin with a couple of prayers. Slowly join your palms and close your eyes. Om Gurubhyastadgurubhyascha Namo Vakamadhimahe Vranimahe cha Tatradyau Dampati Jagatampati Shri Krishna Vagishayatishwarabhyam Samprapta Chakrankana Bhashya Saram Shri Nutnarangendra Yatau Samarpitasvam Shri Krishna Maryam Guru Varyamide Virodhe Kartike Mase Shatatara Kritodayam Yogacharyam Krishna Maryam Guru Varyamaham Bhaje Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So friends, let's just take a moment to think about how big yoga has become in the present day. In fact, you might be surprised to know that there are an estimated 300 million yoga practitioners worldwide. 300 million. So as you can imagine, because of this massive surge in yoga's popularity, there has been a decline in yoga's association with its spiritual roots. There has been a dilution in its essence. This is the reason why I chose this topic for my very first webinar, because I really think it's important to put things in perspective and understand what exactly is the true purpose of yoga. In a way, this is me doing my bit to bring yoga back to its traditional roots. Let's get to it. Just give me a moment to share my screen. So I hope you can see my screen. So you might be surprised to know that yoga is one of the philosophies that is based on the Vedas. This is something even I did not know when I came to yoga in the year 2001. The only idea I had about who a yogi was probably from Amar Chitra Katha comics. And I thought a yogi was somebody who stood on one leg, practiced fasting, did severe austerities and things like that. But I had no idea that it was a spiritual practice that was based on the Vedas. So the question is, what are the Vedas? So the Vedas are the ancient books of knowledge. In fact, the word Veda comes from the Sanskrit verb root vid, which means to know or understand. The Vedas are also called Shruti, which means they are revealed scriptures. They were revealed to sages when they were in a deep state of meditation. In fact, the word Shruti comes from the Sanskrit verb root shru, which means to hear. The Vedas are also called Apaurusheya because they are not of human origin. They are Anadi because they have no beginning in time. And they are also called Ananta because they will never cease to exist. One important thing to note here about the Vedas is that they are an oral tradition. In fact, the Vedas are chanted even today. They are one of the oldest continuous oral traditions which is recognized by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So what the Vedas do is that they provide a framework for us on how to lead a balanced life. The teachings encourage us to go from material pursuits to spiritual inquiry and ultimately spiritual realization. I'll be coming to what that means in the next couple of slides, but I just want to point out that I'm going a little slowly because I am sharing a lot of information here. So let's go on, let's move on. So some of you may already know that the Vedas are classified by Veda Vyasa, and the Vedas are classified into 4 by Veda Vyasa: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. Now, each of these Vedas has several shakhas or branches, and each branch has 4 parts. Like, for example, the Taittiriya is a shakha of the Krishna Yajur Veda. So the Yajur Veda has 2 divisions, Krishna Yajur Veda and Shukla Yajur Veda, and Taittiriya is a shakha of the Krishna Yajur Veda. Now, each of these shakhas or branches has 4 parts: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. Now, what are each of these divisions? So the Samhita is a collection of chants or mantras to various divinities. The Brahmana is an elaboration on the application of the chants which are contained in the Samhita. Now, the Samhita and the Brahmana together are called the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas, and they have to do with our material pursuits. Aranyaka is where the spiritual inquiry begins, which is taken further in the Upanishad, which contains contemplation on the purpose of our existence, leading ultimately to spiritual realization. Together, Aranyaka and Upanishad are called the Jnana Kanda portion of the Vedas, and they have to do with our spiritual pursuits. Now, what exactly is spiritual liberation? The scriptures say that it is permanent suffering, permanent freedom from suffering. Spiritual liberation is permanent freedom from suffering. It is a release from samsara, which is another term for the endless cycle of birth and death. So how do we gain permanent freedom from suffering or release from samsara? The scriptures say that can happen through the realization of our true self. Now, the first question is, why is samsara suffering? The scriptures say that permanent happiness is not guaranteed in any life because each life is a fruition of the stock of karma that we carry from past lives. So the stock of karma that we carry will contain both good and bad karma. And each life that we are given is a combination of the good and bad karma that we carry. And what is karma? Karma is the result of our past actions. So then the question comes, how do we gain this permanent freedom from suffering? The scriptures say that the only way out is to transcend the layers of our being and realize our true self. Now, the question is, what is the true self? So, you may have heard of terms like Atma, soul, spirit, Chit, and terms like that in reference to the true self. In yoga, it is called Purusha. So, then how do I realize my true self? The scriptures say that we can realize the true self or the core of our being by transcending the layers of our existence through practices like yoga. So, this is where practices like yoga come in. It is a central goal in Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, even in Buddhism. Spiritual liberation has many names. So, you may have heard of a term called Mokṣa. It is called Kaivalyam in yoga, and it is called Nirvana in Buddhism. Now, you might wonder, what does moksha have to do with me living in this modern world? So, let me put things in perspective. So, according to Vedic tradition, there are 4 goals of human life. They are called the Purusharthas. The word Purushartha can be split up as Purusha and Artha. Purusha means human and Artha means purpose. So they are 4 in number. So they are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So the Purusharthas provide a framework for us on how to live a balanced life. As you can see, moksha is one of the goals. It is the ultimate goal because it is the only one that promises permanent freedom from suffering. We have already seen this permanent and lasting freedom from suffering, which is a liberation from samsara or the cycle of birth and death. Now, the scriptures say that regardless of whether we understand it or not, whether we accept it or not, we are all moving towards this final goal. However, the Vedas are very compassionate. They don't expect us to come to moksha immediately, which is why we have the other 3. The second one on this list, Artha, has to do with the pursuit of material well-being, giving us the security to pursue the other goals within this framework. Third on this list, Kama, is the pursuit of sensory pleasures and desires, overall enjoyment of life. Now, the first Purushartha, Dharma, provides the framework of morality and ethics for us to pursue Artha and Kama, which is why we say Dharma, Artha, Kama. Now, this is a very, very important framework or foundation for us to be able to take that leap towards moksha. So first, we need to pursue Artha and Kama. We need to do it in a moral way, in an ethical way. Only then we can take the leap towards moksha. Apart from that, dharma has to do with our individual purpose in this world. Now, this is where philosophies like yoga come in. They provide tools for us to pursue these goals in a moral way, in an ethical way. Like, for example, in yoga, we have the yamas and the niyamas, which have to do with the way we relate with others in this world and our own personal disciplines and our own personal disciplines and observances. So all of that will come into action over here when we are trying to pursue artha and kama in a moral way, in an ethical way. So practices like yoga basically provide the tools for us to purify the mind. So act in an ethical way, in a moral way, and then purify the mind, bring it to focus, and then take the leap towards spirituality, leading to the ultimate spiritual goal, which is moksha or kaivalyam, as it is called in yoga. I hope it is clear so far. Now, to illustrate this Vedic vision, I want to share with you a beautiful Śānti Mantra that I have chanted since childhood. Some of you may already know this. This is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I'll just take a moment to chant it. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So as you can see, we chant Shanti 3 times at the end of Shanti mantras. And the reason for that is we are asking for peace. So Shanti means peace. And we are asking for peace from within, and then from around us, and then we are asking for peace from external forces. This is one of the reasons why we chant Shanti 3 times at the end of Shanti mantras. So you can see that there are two words that are repeated in all the 3 lines. And what are they? They are Ma and Gamaya. So you can see Ma, Gamaya, Ma, Gamaya. So what do they mean? Ma means me, and Gamaya means cause me to go or lead me. In this context, we are asking to be led by the divine. From what towards what? To understand that, let's look at the 3rd line first. We are asking to be led from Mrityuhu to Amritam. In other words, we are asking to be led from mortality to immortality, or the cycle of birth and death towards self-realization, from samsara to moksha. Now, to achieve this end, we have to move from asat to sat, and then from tamas to jyoti. I'll just explain further, but this is what we need to do to be able to move from samsara to moksha. So let's go line by line. Let's look at the first line. So in the very first line, we are asking to be led from asat to sat. And what is asat? Literally, it means unreal. Based on the commentaries, it means sense-driven actions based on my ego, based on false notions and selfish tendencies. It means acting from a superficial or egoistic place based on my false self. And what is Sat? Literally, it means real. Based on the commentaries, it means actions based on scriptural injunctions regulating body, breath, mind, senses, etc., based on various philosophies. In other words, it means acting in line with my true self. We are asking for refinement of action for a spiritual purpose, where we act for a higher purpose. This is possible only with a pure mind. So again, as I said earlier, this is where philosophies like yoga come in. They help us to purify every aspect of our being and tune every aspect of our being in the right direction. In a way, it's like bringing a camera to focus. Let's move on to the second line. In the second line, we are asking to move from tamas to jyoti. So what is tamas? Literally, it means darkness or ignorance. But it actually means that the notion that we are limited. It means the notion that we are limited. And what is jyoti? Jyoti literally means light or knowledge. It means clarity of our true nature. So we are asking to be led from the notion that we are limited towards clarity of our true nature. In other words, we are asking to transcend our false selves and realize our true selves. This gradual understanding comes as a consequence of refining actions through purification of the mind through practices like yoga. As the system gets gradually purified, we are able to see with more and more clarity. To use the camera analogy, it happens when the camera is fully focused. So let's go back to the third line one more time. We are asking to be led from mrityuhu or death, which is also mortality, to amritam or immortality. We are asking to be led from samsara to moksha, the cycle of birth and death, to self-realization. So this happens as a consequence of moving from tamas to jyoti, which happens as a consequence of moving from asat to sat. So I hope this is clear. So based on this Vedic framework, there are 6 philosophies and yoga is one of them. So the others are Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa. So each of these philosophies has an original teacher and a core text. Like for yoga, the original teacher is Patanjali Rishi and the core text is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So these philosophies are called āstika darshanas. So āstika basically means they accept the testimony of the Vedas. And darshana or darshanam is basically another name for philosophy. It comes from the Sanskrit verb root drish, which means to see, and it indicates a viewpoint. So all of them have the same ultimate goal as the Vedas, which is spiritual realization. But each one of them has a different way of achieving that end. So each one has different means to achieve that end of self-realization. Okay, so as I said, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are the core text and Maharshi Patanjali is the original teacher. And a yoga is based on the philosophical framework of Sankhya philosophy. So we saw that Sankhya was one of the other āstika darshanas. So what does Sankhya propose? Sankhya is a dualistic philosophy and it proposes 2 fundamental principles, Purusha and Prakriti. So Purusha is another term for the consciousness, Atma, Chit, any of these names, but in yoga and Sankhya, it is called Purusha. And Prakriti is the realm of matter, which includes mind, body, senses, etc. So we are a combination of Purusha and Prakriti. So the goal is to transcend the layers of Prakriti and realize the Purusha as a distinct entity. So yoga takes a practice-based approach. So let's look at the practice of yoga. So as in the Śānti Mantra example, the goal is to refine our everyday actions through purification of the mind, transcend our layers slowly one by one, and bring the mind to a state of concentration so that we can see with clarity. So Patanjali provides an 8-limbed path or Ashtanga yoga to achieve this end. So the word Ashtanga can be split as Ashta Anga. Ashta means 8 and Anga means limbs. So it is a very practical path. It is a step-by-step approach leading towards the final spiritual goal. So the steps gradually move from gross aspects of who we are, moving towards subtle aspects of who we are, and finally realizing our true selves. So the Ashtanga yoga or the 8 limbs of yoga can be classified into 2. They are Bahiranga sadhanas and Antaranga sadhanas. So Bahiranga sadhanas means external limbs and Antaranga sadhanas means internal limbs. So the external limbs are Yama, Niyama, Asana, pranayama and pratyahara. Antaranga sadhanas are dharana, dhyanam, and samadhi. So this is the order in which Patanjali presents the limbs of yoga. So it is very important to note that in a sutra text, the order matters. It is generally believed that the first, what comes earlier in the sutra is more important than the ones that follow, in the sense that they form a very important foundation. So if you see that in the first two limbs as presented by Patanjali in the Bahiranga sadhanas, they are yama and niyama. So yamas have to do with our relationship with the external world, and niyamas have to do with our personal observances and disciplines. So since they come in the beginning of the sutra, they basically form a very, very important foundation for the limbs that are to follow. So even higher aspects of yoga like dharana, dhyanam, and samadhi can be achieved only if we have a firm foundation in the yamas and niyamas. Like, for example, speaking the truth is a yama. Practicing non-violence is a yama. Practicing external and internal purity, rather observing external and internal purity, is a niyama. Practicing contentment is a niyama. So these two together, there are about 10 practices in yamas and niyamas together. And these practices are very, very important for us to lay the groundwork for the rest of the limbs that are to follow. Okay. So asana is basically the postural practice. Pranayama is regulation of breath. Pratyahara is withdrawal of senses. Dharana is concentration. Dhyanam is meditation. And samadhi is final absorption or complete absorption. So as you can see, the most popular and visible limb of yoga, asana, is only one of the 8 limbs. So it is certainly important in this framework, but it cannot be your only practice of yoga. Like, for example, you have an asana practice in the morning or an asana practice in the evening. 1 hour of asana practice cannot be your whole yoga practice. In fact, the goal of even your asana practice is to still the body, regulate the breath, and focus the mind. It is a preparation for the limbs that are to follow. So it is very important to understand that, because in the modern world, yoga is being marketed as only asana. Most people, almost I would safely say about 80 to 90% of people think that yoga is only asana. And this is a very, very unidimensional view, because asana itself is a preparation for the higher limbs that are to follow. It is very, very important for us to understand this, that it is only 1 out of the 8 limbs of yoga. The reason I'm repeating this is because this is very, very important for us to understand. So these are the 8 limbs of yoga as presented by Patanjali. So yoga has to encompass our whole day. It has to encompass every moment of our lives. We need to practice the yamas and the niyamas throughout our life. We need certainly to practice asana. We need to regulate the breath, which will slowly lead us towards pratyahara, withdrawal of senses. And then it will lead us towards dharana, dhyanam, and samadhi. If we don't have a firm foundation in the external limbs, it is very difficult for us to go towards the internal limbs. And only when we are able to take that leap towards the internal limbs can we move from samadhi towards the final goal of self-realization. Otherwise, it is not possible at all. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear. What are the steps, and what is the framework, and what is the purpose of every limb in this framework? Okay, so let's continue. So then, to summarize, What then is the true purpose of yoga? It is a personal, holistic, spiritual journey as a means to liberation and an eternal end to suffering. So, what does this mean for us as everyday people? So, the key word here in my mind is personal and holistic. Holistic is also a very important word because holistic means it encompasses all the limbs of yoga. And the reason I want to focus on this word personal is because we need to understand that this is only for me. I am not competing with anybody else. This is my own personal, holistic, spiritual journey. And this can be in the modern context as well, because only we can work on ourselves. We cannot expect somebody else to work on us. And the thing about practices like yoga is that we are ultimately working on the mind. And there is no way that somebody else can work on our mind. So the key here is personal, and the next key here is holistic. So it needs to encompass all the limbs of yoga, and we need to keep on telling ourselves that this is a personal practice. I cannot stress this enough. If there is one thing that I want you to take away from this webinar, it would be to understand that yoga is a personal, holistic, spiritual journey. 3 keywords: personal, holistic, spiritual. Because most of the time in the modern world, we are competing with everybody else because our vision is always moving outwards. Like practices like yoga encourage us to move inwards and look inwards. Only when we are able to connect with ourselves, only when we are able to transcend the layers of ourselves, then we can hope to move spiritually forward. Otherwise, it is not possible at all. So, how do we do this? Let us think about each day as a spiritual opportunity. Each day is a spiritual opportunity for us to refine our actions and move forward spiritually. The external limbs of yoga, like yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, when they are practiced for a long time, diligently, then they will naturally lead us towards the internal limbs. This is a natural progression. Even somebody who comes to yoga just with asana practice, if they continue to practice that for a very long time, naturally they will start to look inwards. And this is a very important aspect of practice, that it needs to be done for a long time. It needs to be done in an uninterrupted way. In fact, there is a sutra in the first chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras in Samadhipada. The number of the sutra, I think, is 14th sutra in the first chapter, in the first pada. And it goes like this: Satu dirghakala nairantarya satkara adara asevito dridha bhumihi. So this sutra basically describes the qualities of a good practice, and the last 2 words, dridha bhumihi, basically specify that when we practice for a long time, when we practice uninterrupted, when we practice with respect, we practice with the same eagerness, with the same freshness, then it will lead to a firm foundation. So the words dridha bhumi means firm foundation, a firm foundation. So the key is to be consistent. And again, as I said, it is a personal practice. It is a holistic practice. So it is not enough to just practice asana. We certainly need to practice the other limbs of yoga as well, especially the external limbs, because they will lead us from gross aspects of who we are to subtle aspects of who we are, and then slowly allow us to turn inwards so that we are prepared for the internal limbs of yoga. Okay, so we need to continue to practice, and there will certainly be setbacks. So it is not that any practice will not have setbacks. Everybody's life has obstacles, has setbacks, but we need to pick ourselves up and we need to resolve to do better, and we need to reset and start once more. Okay. And another important term that I want to say here is Viniyoga, which basically indicates the adaptation of all the tools of yoga to suit each and every individual. This is because each and every one of us in this world is different. So there was nobody like me before, and there was nobody like you before, and there will be nobody like me in the future. There'll be nobody like you in the future. So all the tools of yoga need to be adapted to suit each and every individual. And nobody is excluded from yoga, regardless of who they are, what is the nationality, what is the religion, what is the physical condition, what is the profession. It does not matter. Yoga is inclusive. Nobody is excluded from yoga. And then another thing that I want to point out here is that yoga has to adapt to your life journey. It is not possible to have the same practice that you did. For example, the practice that I did when I was in my 30s, I cannot do the same practice now when I am in my 50s. My practice has to adapt to the stage of life that I am in. So it is very important for us to understand that. So we need to adapt the tools of yoga. We need to adapt the practice to suit the stage of life that we are in, the physical condition that we are in, the profession that we are in, gender, age, all of these parameters, we need to adapt our practice to help. Okay, so basically, what does all this mean? So ultimately, what is the true purpose of yoga? So the true purpose of yoga is for us to be the best version of who we are. So if we keep continuously adapting the practice of yoga to suit the stage of life that we are in, because we are changing also from a moment to moment basis, we are changing on a daily basis. So our life is never the same as it was yesterday. So as we keep adapting the practice will itself allow us to move towards the best version of who we are. It will help us to find our life's purpose. This is the true purpose of yoga. This is the Vedic vision for yoga. This is the vision of the Vedas for each and every one of us. If we all practice the same thing, and if it is like one size fits all, we will be doing a great disservice to the practice of yoga. Because the purpose of yoga, and consequently the purpose of the Vedas, is for us to understand who we truly are, be the best version of who we are, and then find our life's purpose, and then use our life's purpose to help the world. Ultimately, each and every one of us has something to offer to the world. So the purpose of yoga is for us to find that purpose. Okay, so if we can all understand this, we can move forward in a very beautiful way. So I hope this was clear what the true purpose of yoga is. So let me just take a moment to stop sharing my screen. So I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. I would like to end today's session by chanting a prayer to Sri Patanjali, the original teacher of yoga and the author of the Yoga Sutras. Join your palms and close your eyes. Om Yogena Tasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopakarottam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi Abahu Purushakaram Shankha Chakrasi Dharinam सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः. So thank you so much for joining me. I will see you in my next webinar. I am Chitra Ganesh, bringing you traditional teachings from the heart. Namaste.